Morning. It is good to be with you again today, Friday, the last day of my series on Proverbs 25 for business leaders. Again, we're dealing with healthy, the four pillars of a healthy Christian business leader. And those four pillars are healthy relationships, biblical financial values, biblical spirituality, and balanced living. And as I've been saying throughout the week, because of the reality that we are in one of these kind of extra weeks, I'm dealing with Proverbs. And so Proverbs 25. And so far this week, we've talked about humility in leadership is better than arrogance, winning an argument, losing a war. It's all about communication, and then living in community can be tricky. This morning, I want to talk about being a breath of fresh air. Now, I'm standing in the middle of the football field because you know what? Sometimes you have to come and you have to get into the game. And so it's not just about being someone who sits on the sidelines and just kind of watches. In fact, this passage talks about that reality of not just sitting on the sidelines and watching what happens. And so some people, again, are a breath of fresh air, and some are more like a wet blanket. You know, they come along and someone has a good idea, and they have a way of just destroying that. And that's just kind of who they are. And that's not a good thing, by the way. And you should never be satisfied and say, oh, well, that's just the kind of personality I have. If that's your personality, then by the grace and mercy of God, work on that, because that's not the kind of personality that we want to have and ought to have. Proverbs 25, verses 25 to 28. These are the last verses of this Proverbs, and I just want to share with you. Good news from a faraway place is like a cool drink of water when you are hot and thirsty. Good people who don't stand strong against evil are like springs that have been polluted, or pools that have turned dirt and mud. Just as eating too much honey is not good, it is not good for people to always be looking for honor. People who cannot control themselves are like cities without walls to protect them. So those are some pretty strong statements here in Proverbs. The first thing is this: is good news is like a cool drink of water on a hot day. You know, we as leaders want to be those who are bearers of good news. We want to be the ones that give the good news to those that we're seeking to lead. That's true whether you're in a church. That's true whether you're in a business. That's even true at home. That's true in your community. We want to be those who are giving good news. Now, the ultimate good news, of course, is the fact that Jesus Christ died on the cross for our sins and that he's offering us free forgiveness. And that is the ultimate good news. But in Proverbs, he's not just talking about that. He's talking about good news in situations. And so good news of direction, a plan through these dark days of COVID-19. How are you leading your people through COVID-19? Are you leading them with optimism or pessimism? Are you leading them like a wet blanket or like a fresh drink? We're basically coming alongside and refreshing them in the midst of their time of need. And I encourage you, whether you are leading, again, a church, a business, just your family, whatever it is, be that good news. Be refreshing for them. And then verse 26, being a good person but not standing up against evil is useless. If you've been following the news at all, you know that once again, a residential school situation has arisen once again. And 215 children's bodies found in a mass grave. Shameful. Shameful. And my wife and I have been talking this week. My wife is a psychotherapist, and we've been talking this week about this situation. And one of the challenges that we are finding, good morning, Vince, good to have you on here today. One of the things that we have been talking about is, how is it that nobody spoke up? How is it that nobody stood against this? We know that there were good people. in some of the residential schools. And I'm not saying that the residential schools were good, because they were not. But we know that there were some good people there. Why did they not speak up? Why did they not stand against what was going on? Why did they allow it to continue on without calling those who were doing these evil things to account? Why? Well, here's the thing. Proverbs 25 verse 26 says that if you're a good person, but you just allow evil to go unchecked, and you don't call people on that, we cannot just stand by when we see evil being done. If someone is being mistreated, someone being abused, whether that's at work, whether that's in a school setting, whether that's in a prison setting, whether that is at church, we need to stand up for the oppressed. We need to speak against that. To not speak against that is like being a polluted well, a mud hole. When someone's looking for something refreshing, when someone's looking for some help, they're thirsty, and all that's there is mud. Verse 27, he says, seeking to be constantly honored is not healthy. If you're a person who's always looking for people to praise you, always looking for people to say how wonderful you are, always looking for people to say what a great person you are, understand this. It's like eating too much honey. Eventually, honey's great until it's not. And that's just the way it is. All of a sudden, it's just like, ooh, I've had too much. Every good thing has limits, even being honored. And we need to be careful, but always seeking honor. And then verse 28, the final verse, he says, self-control is the best protection you need. The best protection you need, the best protection I need, is self-control. If you want to help yourself, be a person of self-control. Again, I think back to the residential school situation, and I just wonder, what would have happened if these people had self-control? And if the good people had spoken up and challenged those who did evil. Today, as you go about your day, ask yourself this: am I a breath of fresh air, or am I a wet blanket? May we have self-control, and may we live it out and stand up against evil and stand for righteousness. If we see people doing evil, may we have the courage to say, hey, what are you doing? That's not right. This is what is right. And I know we live in a world today, particularly here in Canada, where who gives you the right to tell me what is right and wrong? And yet when we look at what went on at the residential schools, I think we would all agree that was wrong. And what is the basis for that? The basis is the knowledge that there is good and there is evil. That there are things that are right and there are things that are evil. And we need to stand up for what is right and stand against what is evil. Well, that's the conclusion of this series on Proverbs 25 for this week. From the stands. But again, as I said, sometimes you have to get into the game. And may we get into the game of standing for righteousness and against what is evil. May the Lord bless you. Have a great weekend, and I will see you on Monday as we're going to talk about dad stuff.